Okay, welcome. Good morning. Hello to all over the world, to the rest of the world. Good morning to America. Today, we actually would like to talk about, I would like to talk about smile design, right? I'm working now with the M-Smile module for a good amount of time, and we did some really exciting cases. And so I'm just very excited to share it with you and share a little bit about the background of smile design as well, and what kind of record do you need actually to do it. And then I would like to show how to transfer that smile design also into a kind of aesthetic or bigger reconstructions, like a React bridge, for example. The biggest problem, or the biggest kind of issue we have if you start a bigger reconstruction on a patient is, very often we see that situation, right? We see actually a black hole. We actually see nothing, right? And we have to, our job is to fill that empty space with teeth, with a smile. And smile is, a patient smile is a piece of quality of life. And that's how I treat my patients. By the way, we're in Miami here. We have a 10 people lab, and for us, we're very high end. We're trying to kind of treat every patient as it's our own family member. And so we have a very good relationship with our doctors and our patients. And on purpose, I say our doctors and our patients, because we've always worked as a team. That's very important for us. So we're trying to kind of fill an empty space basically with a smile. So this patient, just showing it here, he's edentulous on this upper arch. And of course, we're planning for implants for the future. But for now, we have to fill the space first with a smile. And so he will basically, as a patient, first for an immediate denture, and or for denture in general, and then we transition to an implant over denture, most likely for him. But anyway, by the way, also, I don't care if you're working on fixed crown bridge implants or if you work on removable like dentures or overdentures. We're doing the same thing. We're filling empty space with teeth. And that's kind of material wise, same thing. I don't care if you work with acrylic, composites, zirconia, lithium disilicates. I'm creating teeth and smiles. And that's kind of important to understand. The material and the restoration type is secondary. Primary is how do we put a smile on a patient's face? So, and to do so, we have to look at smiles. We have to look at patients, especially. We have to make an assumption of, or we have to make a decision often with the aesthetic principles. And the aesthetic principles are pretty simple. We have a midline in a patient's face or in a patient's mouth. And midline doesn't have to be always the same between the eyes or the mouth. There can be differences. Also, we have an incisal edge position. So this kind of already defines a very simple aesthetic principle for a positive or for a successful smile. Now we also have a smile line, a lower lip line, what we usually follow with the incisal edge position. And we also have basically the tooth display. The tooth display is extremely important to show a patient and show patient more on the younger or more on the older side. Usually younger patients show more teeth, usually older patients show less teeth. So that's kind of extremely important to be able to avoid something like this. This is literally a disaster. This is a total failure, basically, because that treatment team did not follow either aesthetic principles or did just not made a proper treatment planning. And we took this case over and delivered a overdenture to cover the transition line, so with a nice flange and removable for the patient to clean when we have a flange. So basically planning is key. The same case, just totally retracted chair side, very quick for a quick snapshot. And that's just, I explain this as a total aesthetic and functional disaster. So that's kind of where unfortunately some people ending up with. And we see these cases a lot to actually help them, the treatment team, to fix it. So if we talk about smile, And if you talk about treatment planning, what I just mentioned, we have tools available. Yeah, so we have, for example, the digital smile design, which is a branding, which is a name out there, which people just utilize for everything to create a diagnostic or smile or whatsoever. I'm very careful with that word. Usually I call it a digital smile evaluation, and I'm utilizing the M-Smile module. Why do I use the M-Smile module? Because it allows me to actually transfer a 2D image and 3D models to converge these two things together, and can create on one side a beautiful two-dimensional smile design for our patient and our customer to show what maybe is possible, but also in the same time I already have a diagnostic cast digitally, and I can actually create that smile already in a three-dimensional form to then actually print the model and start with the treatment. And I'll show you this, how that works or how I utilize that. So to start a treatment like this, we always have to make a facial analysis. And the facial analysis usually, we look at the face, we need the ears, the eyes, the forehead, the nose, chin. So we need photographs to do that. We need photo records. We need a smile, we need retracted smiles. We look at the face, and we start basically looking at the face half. Why? Very easy. We have a dominant and a less dominant side of a face. And that's crucial to understand. Why is it so crucial? Because humans or nature doesn't have symmetry, and a face is not symmetric. That means we have to analyze a face to be able actually to analyze a proper midline in a face. We have a symmetric midline, which is literally, usually we take the pupils and take the middle of the pupils, that's a midline. That can be total off. If you look at me, I have a crooked nose. When I smile not straight, I smile on this side more than on this side. So it's important to understand that these these facial landmarks basically are different. So if we now look at this patient, the left side, and I just mirror that left side and put it back, so now we have two left sides together. Looks pretty normal still, but now when we do the same thing with the right side, and I put the other right side on, I see actually almost a different patient. Why? Because his right side is much more dominant, the patient's right side, than the patient's left side. And that allows me now to differentiate or to make a decision for buccal coitus, for example. Most likely my buccal coitus on the right side, I have to fill that more than on the left side because I have more space most of the time. So that's important to understand, that the facial landmarks are different on each side. So that's kind of definitely go today through your day. If you're in Europe in the afternoon, if you're in Asia, it's already afternoon, to your evening with your family members or so. In the States, you have all day still to go through and look at faces and make a decision, or and evaluate a face to say, hey, what's this guy's dominant or less dominant side, right? Sometimes a little difficult right now with all our masks on, I know, so that's kind of the time it is. But back to our patient, if we start to do that, we need photo records, right? So the right photo records for smile design I require for my customers are three main pictures. Is just rest, is a smile picture, and a fully retracted picture. Important is I have all the landmarks like ears, nose, eyes, forehead, chin, mouth, smile basically in that picture. I try to have the same distance, the same size, that I have consistency that allows me later on to align these pictures. Also, you see here on the left lower side, I need that 12 o'clock smile that allows me to see how far forward or backward actually the upper teeth are in a relationship to the upper lip and to the lower lip. Yeah, that just allows me getting already a three-dimensional idea of that face. And I would like to see some retracted close-ups that I can also evaluate the teeth itself. Usually I like to see a rest or a slight bite opening and a closed centric occlusion picture. Then, or we see on the right, I can start evaluating that tooth situation, intraoral situation, and also talk to the patient. I'm spending a lot of time talking to patient itself just to get their perspective. A dentist perspective is one side, a patient perspective is another side sometimes. So we have to kind of evaluate these different perspectives and then sometimes discuss what's best or make a compromise basically. Because patients sometimes have ideas and I have to tell them, sorry, that's not possible in regards what we are trying to achieve or what you're trying to plan. So this patient told me, well, I don't like my black triangles, so I don't like my triangle teeth basically. I would like to have more square teeth. Also, I have my negative smile line here with the centrals. You see here in green that negative V basically because it's just worn. I explained to him, well, because you look at your lower teeth, they're extruded a little bit, so they actually wear your upper teeth. So if you do something on the upper, we maybe have to adjust the lower to that. Either we do crowns or we can just level the lower incisors, the lower anteriors a little bit to kind of get that force of the upper centrals to not, if you do veneers, to not pop the veneers off, or correct the veneers. If you do crowns, to not really harm that bite, that function. That's very important to always consider that. Also, when you see here, I'm looking at the gingival levels, and I can, most of the time, patients don't even realize that, but that also affects the smile or affects our restoration, positive or negative. So we have to kind of evaluate the height of the gingival levels of the teeth, the apical area of the teeth, just to make sure we're in a good ballpark. Yeah. So usually I look at the centrals the same length as the canine, apically, roughly, the laterals a little bit shorter. And if there are big discrepancies, we maybe want to suggest a crown lengthening to the patient or even a gingival graft. So in this patient, we're concentrating more on his smile, and we see that negative V basically. So now we can, in the centrals, now we can transfer that picture into our M-Smile module, into our Ceramill Mind software, and we can start creating a smile. So you see, I'm popping in here now molds, tooth molds. I will go step by step through that process over the presentation a little bit more in detail. But just for that page to see now, I'm popping in more square teeth. I personally think they're a little bit big, but that's what he liked. That's what he was asking for. As long as the function is still given, I can go with that. And I can see the patient smiling here. And that's what he basically liked to have. Yeah, so now I have to admit it's a nice, good smile. I think the premolars or even canines are a little bit long on that smile, so I have to still bring them up a little bit. But that was the first draft. From there, I can now create a three-dimensional smile or that three-dimensional diagnostics with these teeth. I can orient now the posteriors, the canines, the molars, premolars, basically to our design and can create a functional diagnostic model. And that allows me then later on, after the patient is prepped and temporized with that diagnostic model, I can now start as well doing the final restoration. We decided here on this patient to doing from 8 to actually the other side to 13 for in Germany, from 1-1 to number 2-4 basically, or in not just Germany, it's in the rest of the world. And we're doing on the lateral, on his right upper lateral, basically to the back, we are doing a provisional bridge because he will get 1 or 2 implants placed, since one tooth was not good to restore. And so the doctor and he decided to place implants. So we're doing a bridge here, and we can then finalize this restoration. So I did a provisional bridge from the lateral, but that's what you see here with the A-temp, and you see the color matching is very, very close. And I did the other crowns for layered porcelain fused zirconia crowns. I utilized the Gen X zirconia, so multi-layered, and I just have to really micro layer the incisal edge position, the incisal edge area, and can keep the palatal or the lingual area in full contour zirconia to also avoid more wear on the lower arch. So yeah, so we are in treatment of this. Because of COVID-19, we could not see that restoration yet, so I'm missing the final pictures in the mouth. We're waiting now for dentistry opened up here in Florida just recently, just this Monday actually, or last week Monday. So now the patient has to get back in, and we have to see that restoration, see how in real life the restoration comes out. So now if we look at this here and make the next jump to in our lecture, now we can actually transfer to an aesthetic evaluation and the provisionalization, which is kind of similar to what we just did. I want to just go more in detail how to transfer it in real life into a patient's face. So now this patient, Gina, she basically presented with a absolute collapsed smile or collapsed bite. Why collapsed? Because the upper posteriors are missing for years. And so now finally she got 4 implants placed, 2 on each side, basically, for 300 bridges on one on each side, implant bridges. Also, if you look at her smile, basically we have to open the bite. She's collapsed. She shows a lot of lower gingiva. She would like to have some crown lengthening there on the lower anteriors at least. So that's kind of all in the evaluation. And we then discuss with the doctor. We start doing a digital smile evaluation. That was actually time before the M-Smile, so I utilized the software already there with putting photos in there just to get landmarks and get an idea where we are. And then I can actually start putting teeth in place with a bite opening, so we could open the virtual articulator to the proper opening here. We opened 5 millimeter to be able to raise the lower anteriors and also put some tabletop veneers or tabletop onlays on the posteriors in the lower, in the mandible. And now we can start creating a nice restoration for the maxilla. So we designed this kind of diagnostics and 3-dimensional diagnostics, and now we see we have appropriate size teeth, and it allows us now to actually design from an implant scan or from an implant impression these 2 3-unit bridges on each side. And then for the upper anteriors, we're designing here or preparing here for 6 anterior crowns, basically. So now if you look in reality and go from left to right, this is the initial situation. This is our draft, our diagnostic digital wax up, basically. And here the design of the final restoration. Now here I can then export this as an STL and re-import it to be able to have all the restorations together. So I have the 2 300 bridges on each side. I have the temporary shells. That's what we're planning on her to do, to restore as a temporary. So now the big question is, how are we able to see the full arch into patient's mouth without losing track over the horizontal smile line, over bite, over occlusion, etc., especially in a patient where we very sensitive open the bite and we want to have full control over that. So what I'm doing usually, I'm then creating a stent over the whole arch, which allows you to have the teeth all in the same position in the mouth as they are on the model, on a digital model. So that allows me now to control and check my physical case when I'm getting it, basically by printing a model as well, when I'm getting it out of the milling machine and back on the model, basically on the patient's mouth. That allows you to keep control over the position of these basically 12 teeth. So now I see here the shells, anterior shells. I see in my hand basically the 2 bridges, screw retained implant bridges, and also with the A-temp created a very light shade. Of course, it's Miami, right? Here everything aligned, and then I can put everything in that seating stent. Yeah, and that definitely helps me a lot to keep control. In reality now, on day of seating, so what the doctor did, she prepped the upper anteriors. She then seated the upper posterior implant bridges, so to open up the implants, seat the bridges, did not adjust the occlusion yet. And then basically you see in the right side, retrofit the temporary shells over these preparations. So it means slightly adjusting preparation still, slightly adjusting the temporary shells to make sure that it sits nice and passive. That's very important, the passive fit. And that's here an occlusion shot. You see screw retained bridges and the preparations. And now she can actually put these shells into that stent, fill in the shells with a Luxatemp or with a temporary material to reline them and seat them over these 2 bridges all together into the patient's mouth. That allows her now to have these anterior shells in the exact same position as we have it on the computer screen as our design basically. So that's how you keep full control over position of a full arch restoration in pieces. That's very important. Of course, helpful were the implants here because they don't move. They're just there. And here, kind of the final seating, the final smiles. Now we can evaluate. You see, still it looks a little bit horsey because the upper anteriors now are big and the lowers are so tiny. That's the reason now the next treatment plan is in 2-3 weeks after this was basically starting with the lower and opening the bite as well to also accommodate for different sizes and for a nice smile. That patient is still in treatment, so hopefully next time I can show you a little bit more. Another patient where we did a very similar process, basically, he presented with upper composite veneers, and he was not satisfied. He got them in Colombia and then came to the States here after 3 months and wanted to redo everything because he said, I just don't like the look of that material. And I have to admit, it doesn't look good. Also, the aesthetic is off. You see the shapes are not proper, it's very unnatural. So we then did the same thing. We basically did on the right side, a proper temporary, and we then created the stand to seat everything. So this is basically, that's a bespoke try-in of the porcelain fused zirconia crowns on this case, and we did upper and lower complete individual crowns, and that's the final smile. That's kind of same treatment as you saw before. With this case, we started with the M-Smile and went through the whole design process, and we're able now to present, or he was able to present now finally with a beautiful smile, what he definitely loved to show. So that's kind of very successful cases, especially these are cases you just see they go through and they're slam dunks just because they are so good prepared and you never lose control. Now, if you use the right treatment approach, treatment tools, you don't lose control over that treatment. And that's kind of where we are looking at really very, very strongly into to keep control from the day we starting a case digitally to the day we actually finishing the case and the case goes to the patient's mouth, to have that control in the treatment team. Very, very important. So if we take now very quickly, I don't know how many dentists are on the chat today or on the webinar, but if you take out now a little bit the technical aspect and go into more the patient, especially the patient's insight, right? The emotions. Emotions are crucial for a smile evaluation or for a smile design. Why? Because patients are usually frustrated when they go to the dentist. If they go to the dentist because they want to change their smile. And some of these patients don't even want to smile really. As you see, they hide their smile, they even maybe hold the hand in front of the mouth. So this is our important things to consider, and we call it emotional smile consultation. And we can utilize, again, our digital tools to create that emotional smile consultation, to create the tools for the dentist for that consultation appointment. So here, that patient presented with different colors, different gingiva levels, very worn, very flat teeth, basically. And her personality is just incredible. She's a fun person. She likes to smile. She likes to sing. She likes to dance. And she would love to show that in her smile. So for her, we basically started doing the same workflow. M-Smile, we went through the whole smile design process and then made a digital model, and were able to make a matrix from that model to actually show her live how her smile, what we had in mind, could look like. Yeah, so you see here from that 3D model, basically, we're doing that orange pieces of matrix we make of that model. The doctor fills in Luxatemp or any other resin material and just basically seeds that in the patient's mouth. And that gives the patient an idea how the patient could look. And so taking that out, by the way, I would be happy to be able to work so fast like the doctor. Anyway, so then on the date of the appointment, you see the photo of the patient here with the new teeth. Not perfect, but that's what she liked. She likes some imperfections. And you see her on the right side dancing because the doctor asked her, hey, can you just sing or dance for me and talk for me in the camera? Why? Because it is very important that we're not showing the patient a mirror. Mirrors are out. I always tell my doctors, hey, ban all the mirrors out of your operatory. We don't want to see them. Because what patients do usually when they have the mirror, let's say this is my mirror, they're folding their upper lip behind the ears and looking in the mirror like this, like they would never be seen from other people. So it's very important to actually don't even show mirrors. Use cell phones, cell phone video, cell phone photos or for these snapshots. So what the doctor did, Dr. Lopez here, she made a quick iPhone video or smartphone video of the patient moving and dancing and smiling, and then basically showed her the video and say, what do you think? And the patient was absolutely ecstatic. Unfortunately, you cannot hear the sound of that video, but she's totally ecstatic. She sees that and she's, oh my God, what? That's me? Yeah, so it's just really amazing, and that's very, very emotional how these patients react, how patients react to the new smile. Of course, hopefully positive, right? Like her, she was kind of, oh my God, I want to have that. So if you have these patients at that point, seeing themselves in the camera or on the screen and say, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to do that. They're bought in, and you have to, or you can actually then go to the next step usually and say, all right, let me show or let me explain what we have to do to get you there. And then we discuss what's necessary, what's not necessary, what we can leave out, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's very important to understand and be able to actually then really transfer and move forward with the treatment. Yeah. So we call this emotional smile evaluate or smile consultation. That's a very crucial step into that whole process. So now let's look into really a smile design. How does it work? How does it work step by step? This is Colin, and Colin, I think I showed him at the very first beginning. He's in dentulous, and we want to give him. He has an immediate denture. We want to give him a nicer denture because he didn't like certain things. Negative smile line. He would like to show more teeth base. He would like to have it more natural, and we want to give him a digital denture before we now start with his implant treatment, because with the digital denture we already have the smile design, the digital denture, everything's saved digitally in a computer, and we can utilize these files later on for his implant restorations. So again, we need photo records basically, rest, smile, and retracted. And then we also have the digital records, the three-dimensional records here, model scan. Doctor didn't have an intraoral scan, and we then can merge now these different scans. We scanned his denture as well, and now we're starting putting these records all together. We're merging the records, the two-dimensional records and the three-dimensional records. And we do this in the M-Smile module, starting with putting landmarks on both sides. So we see here, we're browsing for similar landmarks basically to be able to have a merging. And now we see here, we were able to merge the model record, the 3D record to the 2D record to the photo, and can now make certain things more translucent or more opaque to play with. Now we also would like to import the second photo, the smile, that we have a position of the lip when he smiles. That's crucial for every smile design. Again, we're looking for landmarks, marking the landmarks, and merging that smile here together. You can see there in the background around his beard is that retractor from the retracted smile. So both pictures are now on top of each other. And then the next step is basically cutting out the teeth out of that lip, basically to allow us to fill it with new teeth, right? With a new smile. So we're cutting out this, we mark the lip line, and now we analyze the midline of the face. So the computer usually gives you the midline, and that's a symmetric midline. And as you remember, as the very first beginning, not one patient or one human is symmetric. So now that's also important for us to look at this photo and decide where we're going with these lines, okay, where we have to move. And you see here on all these little rulers and arrows and kind of dot space, we can move that, we can even tilt it slightly if we need to, so we can adjust that. These are lines, they don't give us a strict, they don't force us to do something, they give us just directions where we can move the teeth. So the next step, basically, the computer gives us a proposal about a tooth position with these molds, and on the left side we see here we can actually change that. We have a huge library of different library teeth, and we can pop them in and take them out and change them out and browse for the best fitting mold for that specific patient, also for that specific proportion ruler here. We have different proportion rulers. I think I have it, I don't know, a few slides on the next patient I showed that. On the right side on the screen here, we basically see the whole design in a 3-dimension. And that's kind of that important factor, what I love on that software, that any change we do here, we also change 3-dimensionally. So we never lose the control. We can create a beautiful 2-dimensional smile, and we look at the models like it's not possible. So here now we have a real-time adjustment on both, on the 3-dimension and 2-dimension, which is absolutely helpful and shorten the time, the working time, a lot. So now basically we're creating now that smile, we're filling in these teeth. We can now put in also the tooth. We now also change the tooth molds a little bit here. And we can just show a preview with the outline actually, so we see the white mold still, but we already have these new teeth. Then it can now decide, well, do we want to show less teeth or more teeth? Do we have to make the curve more or less? And on the right side again, we see already the 3-dimensional outcome on the ridges on the model, basically related to each other. And that's kind of the first draft what we did. We showed him and his dentist, and they were both, yeah, that's awesome, that's cool, we definitely want to go with that. And as you can see, especially in his face, this is the midline, the symmetric midline between the pupils. Now you go down and you see the teeth. I had to correct slightly, because if I would have moved everything to that midline, it was disbalanced in his face. So I actually moved it a little bit to the patient's right to get a better balance of that smile. Final basically is here we see on the right side his old denture, on the left, on the left side from your left, on our right side the new digital denture, and more tooth display, more positive smile line. Yeah, see negative smile on the left side, right side with a positive smile line. That's what he wanted to achieve, especially as preparation for the implants now. So that's kind of what we're looking at. If you look at just aesthetically, looked at digital denture, they can look really good if they're made well, and if you know how to work with the material. A digital denture can look really aesthetic. Yeah, so he's oh my god, this looks much better than my immediate denture. He's wearing this all the time now. Yeah, and I think that's kind of a good feedback to get from the patient, that he likes his new teeth and he likes to smile with them. They fit perfect. That's what his result or his feedback was basically. So he loves them. Yeah, so he basically is very happy. So now we're in treatment for implants with him, and for implant temporary, we may be utilizing these dentures as an implant temporary, and then designing the implant case with that smile design in mind. So that's all cool stuff. But now in my business, we do a lot of really full mouth reconstructions. We do a lot of trauma patients. We do a lot of patients that really basically got botched from other previous treatments already. So now we go more into smile design for interdisciplinary treatment. So I want to show you today where you can actually utilize that M-Smile module in all different kind of variations. Okay, so that's kind of interesting to look at. So this patient, you can most likely tell is not happy. And so for her, the only treatment option from the clinical side was, from her dentist's perspective, was extracting everything and doing basically a hybrid upper and lower, basically kind of all on 4, in this case all on 6s on the maxilla and mandible. So to start the treatment, also here we want to do plan a planned surgery. So with the surgical guides, we do an immediate loading on day of surgery, and then the final. And I will show you the treatment from start to finish. So here now we're doing the same thing. I'm utilizing the M-Smile also to prepare my surgical cases, to not lose control over tooth position and actually be able to plan the implant position properly to our new planned teeth. So I do the same thing. I look for landmarks, merge these two images together, and all the 2D and the 3D together. Have the smile, do the same thing, look for landmarks and merge that together. So it's the same protocol basically, and be able to cut out the lips and start basically here now putting smiles and teeth in relation to the face. For her, that was quite difficult because she has a relatively large face, but also really big asymmetries in her face. Yeah, so that was important to play with this now. What I want to show here, not finished with the position here, but I want to also utilize different proportion guides. Yeah, so I have the golden ratio here. And when I look to the, yeah, it's the same picture. I want to show this here, golden ratio. Then look to the next slide. I have can also modified ratios. So I can actually modify these numbers, and that allows me for here in kind of that mint green here, I can resize the teeth. I can then basically show my landmarks relationship of the tooth position to the nose, for example, yeah, or to the mouth or to the chin, also to the pupils. So that's important to kind of play with these proportion guides. They help already a lot in terms of regards tooth size, basically, for that smile. So here now, again, midline, and look in the nose. The nose is not in the middle on her, so I also have to move and shift teeth a little bit back and forth, position them properly. On the right side, again, you see in 3 dimensions, basically, I then can play with the teeth. By the way, I also can adjust the tooth color. She wanted to have very bright teeth, so we put something brighter in. On for our negative little bit, then we look at the plan and see contours nice and easy. So I had to go back and forth a little bit with the color. But anyway, so we put this in, and she liked basically to really second to whoops. I think I lost my presentation very quick. Let's see here. Sorry for that. So here. She liked that. She said, oh yeah, that's so cool. I want to have a broad smile. And we'll see later she will change her mind. Yeah, it's also sometimes can be tricky. You can show a smile on face, says, yes, this is amazing. I love it. And then you have to actually go back a little bit to reality. So on her now, we basically planning this. We so now here from A to Z before we planning the implants. What I liked on the Gerbach software on the Ceramill Mind is I can also use different face bows. So in this case, for example, we use the Kois facial analyzer, and that mounting table. I can scan that and can actually have that record what the doctor took in the patient's mouth on my screen. That helps me a lot for defining the plane of occlusion, and then I can actually set up the teeth with my smile design in mind. In that kind of plane of occlusion. These are just screenshots where I'm putting in now the smile design, basically what I designed before with the face, also in consideration to occlusion and function. And I can now utilize these records when I have my final position of the teeth. I can utilize that specific information in my implant planning software. So that's kind of where I also love the M-Smile to actually design the diagnostics and export it to my implant planning software. Here I'm utilizing co-diagnostics. On exocad I can use exoplan. Same thing, I can utilize these informations in planning my implants. And now here we're going into the implant treatment first as a first step. So we're designing or planning position of the implants, finish up the design of the temporary here in relation to the implants, or actually the implants in relation to the temporary. We usually plan always from the restorative perspective, if possible with the bone. That allows us also to look into bone reduction, how much bone we have to reduce, and I can design surgical guides and temporaries. I work most of the time with stackable systems. So I'm working here with a bone reduction guide, which you see in white on the upper pictures, and then I have a surgical guide. Clicking on the bone reduction guide allows you to reduce the bone. The surgical guide that allows me to put the implants in. and the bone reduction guide stays in place, and I can now place the temporary on that bone reduction guide and convert that temporary basically to a screw retained immediate provisional in the patient's mouth on day of surgery. That's the goal. Now for her, we did that. So we fabricated all these devices, surgical guides, surgical guide fabrication and temporary. And that is basically a few days after surgery. And you see the temporary, we did the maxilla first before we did the mandible. You see the maxilla is placed and her big smile. And then she said, yeah, it looks really cool, but I think we maybe have to make it a little bit smaller. My original teeth were not as big. And I agree, she wanted to have big teeth first, and that's the sweetness on doing a provisional or prototype, to be able now to actually go back and maybe make a second one after a few months before we do the final. So this year is basically now, after 4 months, we started with the definitive restoration. So this is then a new prototype, more towards her liking. So I personally think we should have filled the buccal corridor a little bit more. By the way, the lower is now as well in. But that's what she liked. That she said that's how I used to look, with rounded teeth and not so wide, not so broad, basically. So we adjusted this a little bit to her liking, and now I can utilize that information, that new design of the prototype, into my Ceramill Mind software to design the final reconstruction. And on these type of restorations, we use the REACT bridge. Basically, we use that gingiva module on the Ceramill Mind software, and now we transfer more into the restorative segment of the lecture today. So now we basically planning, or we designing the final restoration. On this case, we work very digital. The customer is in San Francisco, we are in Miami, so we're on East and West Coast. So what he does usually, he actually tries in that prototype. He sends the patient home, uses as a temporary, adjusting occlusion, function, aesthetic, etc. Then after a week or sometimes 2 or 3 weeks, patient comes back. The doctor takes out that temporary, screws it on my master cast, what you see here, where we have some landmarks ground in basically, and then he's scanning it with his Trio scanner and sent me that file, because he likes to keep this in the mouth, and then he puts it back into the patient's mouth. So that allows me now to have actually a scan of the real temporary in occlusion, basically in my CAD/CAM software in Ceramill Mind, and then he sends the bottles back for me to assemble the final restoration on that master cast. So the first scan, what I usually would do in the lab, scanning the adjusted prototype, he does in his office with his intraoral scanner on the model, not in the patient's mouth, on the model, to give me the exact alignment of the position of the temp. So now I get this back, and then in the laboratory, I can utilize the gingiva module to design a full arch restoration. I'll show here the upper. So we designed basically the gingiva part. Here I used the thimble module. Basically, I designed thimbles, and then straight on the thimbles also the crowns. With the new update, what we have with Ceramill Mind now, we can do all in one shot. We don't have to rescan or fabricate first the thimbles and then the crowns. Now, I usually go from A to Z in one shot. That also allows me to keep much more control over the restoration. Any rescan, any in between fabricating of a restoration or of a part of the restoration can cause inaccuracies and maybe errors. So I always utilize the module to this fullest extent, basically, to say, all right, I'm designing crowns straight on my design here. And that's then here the design, upper and lower, so in the middle of the lower here still. And in this patient, very strong bite, we decided to do the bar or the frame basically in metal. We used selective laser melting here in this case, and lithium disilicate crowns on her. Here in the middle of the making, teeth are just polished, not glazed yet, and but I'm already preparing the metal with opaquing. On the right side, we see the glazed teeth, and I put some pink on there. I think they're already cemented. I cemented teeth on that metal frame. We also could use a polymer like a PEEK, and I can then finish up that restoration with composite in the gingiva, and the ceramic is glazed and done and polished. that's finished. Yeah, so let's look into this REAX module a little bit more into that process. So here, a different case just to explain. I have a scan of a model or intraoral scan with scan bodies in place. Here the scan bodies from a different view. I start aligning these scan bodies with my library in the Ceramill M software. So I put in my library scan bodies, align them together, and start basically defining the emergence profile if there is one. On these cases, we barely have one usually, so I can usually skip over. And now I can start with my tooth placement. So I can start placing teeth into the position I would like. I can use simple or chain mode. Simple mode means I can move every individual tooth on that ridge. The chain mode is I can literally use the chain, use all the teeth together. I use usually combination. I start with the chain and I go simple for refinements. I have some videos for that, but it would just blast the time today. So we unfortunately just have 1 hour. We're coming towards the end of our presentation, so I have to speed up a little bit. Basically, after I'm kind of satisfied with the position of the teeth, I then can define basically the abutments. I can merge that together. Nowadays, what I do most of the time for these cases, if my teeth are not exactly on an implant position, I actually go into my expert mode and then define all the teeth as pontics. And that allows you to move teeth freely, totally not in relationship to implants. That makes life a little bit easier. And here now I can freeform the teeth. I can do adjustments, aesthetically adjustments or functional adjustments to the teeth itself, to each individual tooth. So I really go step by step now. It's maybe a little bit boring for some of you guys, but I know some of you are asking for that always. Yeah, so I then adapt all these pontics to the gingiva, that nothing is running through. And I now start designing my gingiva, utilize the MGN and Effect module. So I have to kind of block out that model first, that there are undercuts. It doesn't really make sense in this part because I don't have a flange anyway on hybrids. We try to avoid flanges or ridge laps as good as possible, just for hygiene, right? We just want to meet the ridge basically. But this is also a software, I don't want to say issue, but it's normal in softwares. It's basically a part of the denture module where we can go with the same alignment, and there is a blockout portion for basically the ridge, for the ridge laps, for the flanges of the denture. So that's the same thing. We have to go through that step very quick. But that also defines the path of insertion of our restoration. And here in blue now, the blocked out model, which is basically a copy of the other model. And I now can start designing that gingiva. You see here my little orange line, the green dots. I go around that gingiva where I would like to have the gingiva. And sometimes I have to go a little bit more than I actually want to, but I can basically take it back later on. So now computer gives me a proposal for the gingiva, seen here in pink, and now I can start adjusting. I can see here on the central, I can make the central a little bit longer. I can literally move that gingiva with my mouse up and down and make it thicker or thinner. And here now I move all these into the position I would like to have the gingiva. And on the intaglio surface, I usually mark it to not shrink. So I exclude that area from shrinkage, especially if I work on zirconia or on PEEK, on a polymer. Why? I would like to have that material contacting the gingiva. Zirconia and PEEK are wonderful materials to actually work with gingiva in contact, because gingiva shows the least kind of amount of information with these materials, because they're just very, very, very clean. Nothing really sticks to this material in terms of bacteria. So I like to exclude them from shrinkage and shrink all the other portions around for a thin composite or ceramic layering. I can, by the way, define the depth of shrinkage. So here I defined 1 millimeter, and I can do just 0.5 millimeter. So I can define that very, very detailed. Here I can freeform the gingiva. I can, after that shrinkage, you see it's much thinner now. I can now again thicken areas. I can move areas around. And now, if I want, I can either go with that design and start designing my prototype, my full anatomic prototype, and go to print or mill, or I can now actually utilize the tooth position and put my thimbles in. Yeah, so cutback design, I can now choose thimble, and I have these thimbles in here. I just have to orient them. They're also going to are thrown in basically. So now I have to orient them better into my path of insertion, into my position of the thimbles. I would like to have them, especially also the margin, and I position them to the position I would like to. And then basically I can finish this up with these thimbles in place for then later on crowns, as shown before. Or if I do not want to do the thimbles, by the way, the thimble module allows me now, after definement of that, after finish, to actually do the secondary construction with other crowns. Yeah, so this here basically I can then design straight the crowns, so I can fabricate both in the same time. Or I stay with the restoration in full anatomic, for example, for a zirconia, for a typical REAX bridge, and I can now start designing. That's a little bit stretched, that image I just see. Doesn't matter, you see where I'm going to. I'm designing basically my prototype before I go into zirconia. Here I can also then cut back the aesthetic zones. I can cut back the anteriors. Usually I cut back from first premolar to first premolar or more. That depends on our customer, our patient, where we want to put the translucency in more. After designing or basically creating these cutbacks, very minimal cutbacks. I usually don't cut back more than 0.5 millimeter for a micro layering. I then can mill the restoration zirconia. Nowadays, I utilize for most of this restoration the GenX material, which is a multi-layered high-strength zirconia that allows me to actually make the cutback even more minimal, just because I already have a beautiful color support from my restorative material, and I just have to take care for the gingiva, the pink area basically, because I usually don't even color this anymore. I don't even color the pink, the gingival area in pink with the Ceramill liquids. I actually just layer pink porcelain, and that comes very nice. So here we see then the prototype. Here in the maxilla, the lower is the wax setup for a hybrid denture on a titanium bar, but we concentrate on the upper right now. Here is the prototype on my articulator, just on my bench, a quick snapshot, and then on the trine in the patient's mouth. So these prototypes are extremely important to test drive the patient's smile first, and especially here we see there are corrections necessary. Yeah? So we see here on the upper left, the patient, it's canted. So that information, just that photo itself, helps really correcting the final restoration. Also with a little floss in between the eyes or the midline to get some ideas where we are. This is the patient with his immediate temporary after surgery in his mouth. Looks nice, but there's still some inaccuracies or some disbalances I would like to correct basically. And then we're getting this information to the lab. I will spray it with scan spray, scan it basically, and be able to mill it in zirconia after I do the changes, and finishing up with a slight cutback with slight porcelain layerings. And as mentioned already, the intactness surface you see is actually not pink, it's tooth colored. We don't see that. That's the tissue touching, and I just layer basically the pink gingiva on top, very, very minimal. And that's the final patient smile with his REAX bridge. And his face was extremely challenging for smile design. Why? Because you can tell he's total asymmetric. Which one is his dominant and less dominant side? His left side, so on you on the screen on the right side, is his less dominant side. And for him, you really can see it very easy. His eye is a little bit smaller. The whole left side is more narrow. The buccal corridor is less in compared to the right side. Bigger eye, wider mouth, even the mouth is slightly canted, its side opens more, so that's definitely the more dominant side. Look at his right cheek, for example. His area here, his chin, is definitely more dominant. So we had to play a lot with shapes and contours of these teeth to create a very natural smile, and that's absolutely not straight, but that's on purpose. Just look at the lower lip. Yeah, so we had to basically balance aesthetics here, and then we see here the final zirconia layered REX bridge. So that's kind of goes towards the end of our presentation.